You are listening to the Stand Out Now podcast with your host, Dave Mendonca. Check out each episode as top experts share their proven marketing, publicity, and sales tips to help you cut through the advertising noise so you can reach your ideal clients, get noticed, and connect with powerful influencers. The Stand Out Now podcast is brought to you by podcastinterviewexperts.com, helping entrepreneurs attract clients through business podcast guest appearances.
Welcome to the Stand Out Now podcast. I'm Dave Mendonca. Today we have a powerhouse of an entrepreneur on the show. She co-founded Speaker Spotlight, which has arranged over 20,000 speaking engagements for its clients in over 30 countries since 1995. And she co-founded the Spotlight Agency, which connects high-caliber talent with opportunities worldwide. Farah Perelmuter, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Dave. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. Did I get the last name right? Was that okay?
You did. That was perfect.
Yes. All right. This is a good start. All right. First off, Farah, so just doing some reading about you, I've noticed that being an entrepreneur has always been a part of your life. Now, what was the attraction early on?
Well, you know what? My mother was very creative, and she always came up with very interesting ideas for myself and my sister and all of our friends. And I think that's what got me thinking, and just always coming up with new plans, I guess, getting myself in trouble with my friends. It was just constant creativity in our house. Usually everything ended up okay, and we didn't get into too much trouble, but It was a house full of creativity and new ideas constantly. And I think a lot of it came from my mother and from reading books.
What was it about your mother? What made her creative?
You know what? I have to say, I really think a lot of it's innate. I think a lot of kids are born with it inside of them, and it's about whether or not it's being fostered. I think that my mom brought it out in me. Perhaps her parents brought it out in her. I'm not sure about that. But I think being in an environment where creativity is really enhanced and encouraged really allowed me to open my mind. And we were surrounded by it. It was incredible.
So give me an example of a creative idea back then. What would be one?
Well, what she would do is she would have the kids from our neighborhood come down to our basement, which she had painted to look like an outdoor scene. Mm-hmm. So the carpeting was dark green shag to look like grass. And then she painted hills on the wall, so it looks like an outdoor scene. And she had a live tree that was cut down and a swing hanging from the ceiling. So it was just a wonderland.
Wow.
Then all the kids brought towels and we lied on the floor, and then we closed our eyes and she took us on an imaginary story in our minds, and we went on a magic carpet ride. And it was this whole long story that we had to visualize in our minds. And then afterwards, we had to clean up the basement, and whoever did the best job got the top banana award. And then when she took us out for ice cream, and it was all a whole big ruse to get the basement cleaned up.
Clever.
So, yeah, very clever.
Oh my goodness. So early on, you were exposed to your imagination being fostered, as well you were exposed to storytelling, because she was painting up the basement, making it look a certain way to transport you to someplace. And she would narrate the story to get you from point A to point B. Very interesting. Okay.
Yes, and it was interesting because it was all about visualization and engagement. So in our minds, we had to travel through time and over the hills, and then we had to choose different directions to go to and different time zones. And it was this whole elaborate story, and it was engagement. We had to decide where to go. And then in our mind's eyes, we can see different landscapes. It was just incredible. And then over the years, I've done it to my children's classes when they were young.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like that was a foundation that would lead to your entrepreneurship. Because early on, you had some businesses, didn't you? When you were a kid?
Well, yeah. So then when I was 9, my sister and I started performing at birthday parties. We had this little act, and we got paid by being served cake. So that was our payment. And then later we started having carnivals in our backyard. And so then, we just started like charging people to set up little like booths in our backyard and then charging admittance. And, we were probably like 10 or 11. We started doing that. I had my first real business when I was 16. Prior to that, I had been teaching at modeling agencies in Winnipeg. When I taught classes, I taught runway and makeup, how to pose in front of a camera. And after a while, I started selling the packages to girls and their parents. And I started to feel a little bit uncomfortable because I knew many of the girls would never become models. So at the age of 16, I started my own program where it was a self-development course for young girls. And so I taught the same type of material, but it was more geared towards self-confidence and self-esteem. So I started that when I was 16. And I did that a few times, also in Winnipeg. Interestingly, from working at different modeling agencies, that's how I knew how to start a business. And then eventually when I started my business now, it was based on how a modeling agency was run.
Right. So like back when you were 16, like how did you get the word out about your program?
I made a little flyer and then I just went door to door. There was no such thing as internet back then. So I photocopied it and I put it in mailboxes and I called people and I think I distributed it to different schools and I think I put it up on like light stands. And then I was also I put an ad in the paper. I did whatever I can do. And I remember I just got my driver's license. So a few girls signed up and I picked them up in my car to bring them down to where the school was. And I negotiated a really good deal for rent. Yeah.
How did you know? Like, so you're 16 years old. Like, how do you know to find this gap that you found? And then you have the drive to go towards that. Like, what clicked for you? Like, it doesn't sound like your parents, they weren't entrepreneurs, correct? Like, so where did this come from?
It came from reading books. I read a lot of books like rags to riches books. Like, not that I was living in rags, but I found those types of stories really intriguing. It was a lot of books about women entrepreneurs, just how they like scratched their way up to success. And I just found it so inspiring and intriguing and compelling. And I think it was extremely motivating and inspiring to me. And I just loved it. I think it got to me. And I didn't even realize it at the time. I just thought these were fun ideas.
Sure.
I didn't really know what was going to happen eventually. I was just having fun.
Interesting, because a lot of teenagers, they wouldn't have had that kind of, I don't know, like just that openness towards that kind of route, or they'd be too busy partying and whatnot. But it seemed like you had a maturity about yourself. You were having fun, but you still saw the business in it, and you went after it, and you were reading, like you're always learning, it sounded like to me. I don't know. I don't want to generalize here, but there are teenagers out there who just want to drink beer, so kudos to you.
Okay, so don't get me wrong. I really had a lot of fun in high school. I wasn't like exactly the most studious kid in the world. Okay. And I really was not reading business books. So I was not that kid at all. Okay. In my mind, I was just having fun. I was sort of bored in many ways, and this was something to do. I had big dreams, but I wasn't fully aware of how motivated I was until a little bit later on. This was something to do because it was fun and it was fun projects.
Right.
But I really didn't know what was about to happen until a little bit later.
So what was the turning point? When did you realize the ambition?
When I graduated high school, let me backtrack a bit. Every night before I went to bed as a teenager, I had this one vision in my head. I knew I wanted more, but I didn't know what I wanted. So as I said, I grew up in Winnipeg, but every night I kept seeing in my mind this one image. And that is, I walked out of the elevator in a building, and right in front of me, there was my business. And I walked into my business, and there was my staff, and I saw the name of the business. I didn't know what it was yet. And then I'd walk into my private office and I'd sit down at my glass desk and I'd look out the window and I'd see the CN Tower. Wow. And every night I'd have the same image over and over again in my mind. And I felt like I needed to make it happen. So after high school, I actually moved to Toronto by myself.
Wow.
That's where the CN Tower is. And I lived on my own. I was only 17. I just felt like I needed to make something happen. So I didn't go to school. I worked. I had worked at modeling agencies in Winnipeg. So that's what I did in Toronto. And I actually revamped this whole modeling agency because I didn't think they were working efficiently. So I redid their whole office. And then I really understood how to work that business properly. And then when I was living in Toronto, I remember going up the CN Tower, looking down at all the twinkling lights. And I thought, every light I see is an opportunity. And that's when I felt it really build up, this ambition that I didn't know I had. And I thought, I think I need to go to school. And I think I actually need a really good education. So that's the first time that I really felt it. And then I ended up going to Western in London, Ontario, which is actually exciting. I'm now on the board of the Alumni Association.
Yes.
It's very ironic because I remember dreaming of being able to go to Western. So anyway, I ended up going to Western and graduating from Western. And it was in those years at Western that everything changed for me. That's when I met students who were really ambitious and really driven. And that's when I got onto the path that I recognized that I had ambition, true ambition, and I was willing to work really hard to make it happen.
Why Toronto? I guess it's you're a girl from Winnipeg. I guess you see the big city. You're like, what, that is the Mecca. That is the headquarters of Canada, even though many parts of the country would like to dispute that. But what was it about Toronto that really rang true to you?
Well, I love Winnipeg. I love growing up there. A lot of my family is still in Winnipeg, so shout out. Winnipeg, go Jets, go.
Nice.
I just felt that I really craved the fast-paced big city vibe. I just wanted to not only find the opportunities that were in the big city, but I wanted to create my own opportunity. And I just thought Toronto was a place to do that.
For sure. You know what? It's the story of many successful entrepreneurs, the ones that are driven, the ones that do get that vision. And it's borderline obsession, you might say, but it's like a focus. You need an undeterred focus. Like I'm sure your mom and dad, when you told them, hey guys, listen, I'm going to Toronto. I know I'm 17. I'm sure, the first reaction wasn't like, yeah, go, get out of here. And I don't think so, but you kept going and you kept striving.
Yeah. I still don't know how they let me go. I have a 17-year-old daughter now, and I'm like, there is no way I would ever let her leave me like that.
Right.
But I'm extremely grateful they let me go.
My goodness. So you're at Western. What did you take at Western?
So I started off in, there's a program called ACS, and it was like an undergraduate business program. And interestingly, there's a program there, it was called Business 257, and I dropped it twice. I hated it so much, and I had to change my major. It was the accounting. I couldn't do the accounting. I hated it. I thought, well, this is so stupid. I'm just going to hire accountants. Why do I need this? So I had to drop my major. All of my electives were in psychology, which I loved. So I switched to psychology my last year, which for me actually was a great choice because I like the combination of business and psychology together. So I graduated with psychology, and then I moved to Toronto, and I did 2 more years in Toronto in marketing, and then that's what I ended up with. I also did an extra year in Toronto and something else. Then I met my husband, and that's a whole other chapter.
Yes, and that's one we're going to go into right now.
Okay.
So we're talking about Martin here.
Yes.
So you two co-founded Speaker Spotlight, but tell us the genesis of how that came to be.
Okay, so I was working in marketing. So my uncle wanted to become a speaker, and he asked me to work on his promotional products, help design them. And I said, absolutely, it'd be my pleasure, no problem, but what's a speaker? Because I was only 24, I had never seen a speaker, and I didn't realize that people spoke and got paid for it. So I thought I'd do some research, and I ended up doing a year of research, and I got very immersed in the world of speakers. And that's when I realized there was something there. And meanwhile, my husband, we were very newly married, and he was practicing law. Actually, this is right before we got married. He just passed his bar exams. He just got a job. And basically, right when we got married, we quit our jobs and we started Speaker Spotlight. So pretty much all within 1 month.
Okay, wait a second. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
So you're telling me he quits his lawyer path, you quit your job, and you're like, let's create a business from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
So how many people told you were nuts?
Every single person we knew. Yes.
Oh my goodness. So early stages, Speaker Spotlight. How are you getting the word out? What tactical things did you guys do? Did you knock on doors? Advertising? What did you do? Step by step.
Okay, so we did more than 100 cold calls a day. We also did many press releases and mailings. Okay, so also there was no internet. So I remember doing hundreds of mailings this was out of our apartment. I remember my fingers bleeding because I would like fold them all and mail them because we couldn't afford a mailing house. So I would do them all out of our apartment.
Wow.
And we had to share a phone because we only had one phone and the fax phone. So we would share the phone. We were out of one room in our apartment.
Oh my God.
And it was just the two of us. And so we were out of there for 4 years. And then my husband was the courier. So at 4:00, he'd jump on his bike and he'd give out all the packages, all of our speakers' packages.
On a bike? Are you kidding me?
On a bike. No, yeah, on a bike. And he'd have his backpack.
Wow.
And it was all like VHS.
Oh my God.
VHSs.
Jeez.
Don't we sound completely ancient? Oh my
it's
God.
Unbelievable.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah. And I remember what I used to do is I would go down to the hotels at night. Not that we'd have our own speakers speaking at the events, but I would go and I'd meet all the meeting planners and I would give out my cards, saying, do you have speakers here? You hire speakers? I represent speakers. I give my cards. But at the very beginning, what I did is I used to go to National Speakers Association. They're around now. It's a huge group of speakers, and they have a Canadian chapters. And I would go every month to learn about speaking industry. After about a year, I stood up at the end and I said, I'm about to start the best and biggest speakers bureau in Canada. If anyone is looking for representation, let me know. And then after that, the floodgates opened.
Wow.
And then I asked 18 speakers. I chose which 18 I wanted to work with, and I asked them each for $600 so that I can buy a computer and business cards. And that's how it started.
So it just sounds like to me you guys had tremendous conviction, tremendous dedication, doing whatever it takes to launch that baby off the ground. Question for you here is, how did you get these people to trust you guys? Because you were just starting. What experience did you have? Did anybody ask you, Farah, what have you done in the past to prove that you can actually get the job done?
I have no idea why they trusted us.
Interesting.
You know what? I think they saw how passionate we were. Well, I went to them with all these all these graphs I put together and my plans, my strategies. I'll tell you a quick story of how crazy passionate I was about this idea. There was this woman named Dottie Walters who was sort of the guru of the speaking world. And she's American, and she came to Toronto to do a talk to speakers about how to market themselves. So this was very early on in Speaker Spotlight history. Mm. So she came to do the seminar. So during the first break, I went up to her and I said, my name is Farah and I'm starting a speakers bureau in Toronto. I was wondering if I can show you some of my ideas and perhaps you can give me some feedback. And she said, you know what, I would love to. You can call me in California and it's $50 for 10 minutes. And I'm like, you know what, there is no way. There's no way I can afford that. So at the next break, I followed her into the washroom and I went into the stall next to her and I slid all my paperwork under the wall.
What?
And yeah. So I'm telling you, I was very driven.
Wow.
And I got all my answers. Yeah, I wouldn't stop until I got what I wanted.
You have to be relentless. No one's going to give it to you. And you found a way. That might mean going into the girls' bathroom.
Yeah, I took many risks.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's paid off because Speaker Spotlight's very successful today. And just curious, like, how do you guys promote your company now? Like, do you guys use Facebook ads? Is it word of mouth? Like, what is it?
Hmm. Now I wouldn't take as many crazy risks because now I actually have more to lose.
Mm.
I already embarrassed my kids enough. So, yeah. Now we use various types of marketing tools. We're pretty active on all social media platforms. You can find Speaker Spotlight on Facebook, on Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. Same thing with the Spotlight Agency. Spotlight Agency is more active on Instagram than the others. We also use them in very unique ways. So, for instance, with Speaker Spotlight, we have speakers come into our boardroom and they update us on really interesting projects that they're working on or new topics that they're working on or books that are about to be released. Sort of, we get the inside scoop on what's going on, and we videotape those meetings, and then we post them on YouTube. We also post them on our blog. So we provide that content out to the public. So that's sort of like a behind the scenes peek into what's going on. So we provide original content on social media. That's been a really useful tool for us. Then, of course, we do e-blasts direct to our clients, and we separate our clients into groups as well. So they're more targeted that way. We do them by category as well. So we may do mental health speakers, or if we sign on one big speaker, then we'll do an individual targeted e-blast that way.
Mm. Email marketing's massive. Like if you have a good size list, you have a lot of power. So I can only assume Speaker Spotlight has an incredible list, and it's a great thing to leverage.
Absolutely. Especially if it's targeted. That's the key.
So when you are marketing your clients, the speakers, when you're trying to book them, what is that process like? How do you get these people conferences? Like, who do you reach out to? I guess you give them a package of some sort, like some sort of profile package online, a kit of some sort. Like, how does it work?
So it works in different ways. On our roster, we have roughly 550 speakers. So that's on our website at speakers.ca. We also have very extensive list of our clients whom we work with regularly. So our sales team will either recommend speakers to our clients. So if they're looking for a speaker on, say, leadership, they may recommend Chris Hadfield, the astronaut and former commander of the International Space Center, or they could represent Simon Sinek, who is the writer of Start With Why, or there may, someone else. Or it could be that the client comes to us and says, my conference is on mental health issues and I want to book Margaret Trudeau, who is the mother of Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, whom we've worked with for over 20 years. So it works either way. Either we'll recommend speakers based on the theme of the event, or else our client will come to us and ask for a speaker specifically. So it really depends on what's happening with each individual event.
It's interesting. You mentioned some pretty big names there. Mr. Hadfield and it was Trudeau, you said? Who else has stopped by the office? I can only imagine, like, you're just having your usual day. You got your cup of joe, and all of a sudden, like, Chris Hadfield, an astronaut, pops by. Yes.
It's so interesting. Martin Luther King III came by not too long ago, so we're working with him. Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York, came by a little while ago. It's so interesting. It's a constant influx of the most fascinating people in the whole world. And also, I have to say, it's also the people you've never heard of who have the most extraordinary stories.
Right.
It truly is.
Any story that stood out?
Oh my God. There are a lot.
Okay.
There are so many.
Gotcha. Okay.
Give me a topic and I'll tell you a story.
Okay. How about finance?
Okay. David Chilton. He wrote The Wealthy Barber. His book was #1 in Canada, like other than the Bible, for many, many, many years. He self-published his book, and many people probably know him as one of the dragons on the Dragon's Den. And so he talks about personal finance. So we've also worked with him, oh my God, for maybe 17 years, 18 years. But he's one of my favorite speakers because he's a phenomenal speaker in the way he speaks. He talks about having a conversation with the audience. And he's just such a casual speaker, lots of stories in the way he speaks. And he's one of my favorite speakers for sure, Dave Chilton.
Right. And for the American listeners out there, Dragon's Den is like the Shark Tank of Canada.
Shark Tank. We also work with Kevin O'Leary. There's another one.
Mr. Wonderful. You've actually spoken with him, eh?
Yes, we work with him.
Fantastic.
Yes.
You were also talking about early on about the Spotlight Agency. Is there any difference in the way that you market that as opposed to Speaker Spotlight?
So like I say, in regards to the talent in the Spotlight Agency, we're a little bit heavier on Instagram with that talent. It's a little bit more visual based. Speaker Spotlight website is a little bit more content heavy with topics. We have more videos on Speaker Spotlight, and it's a little heavier on content. Spotlight Agency, it's more visual. It's also newer. Spotlight Agency was just launched in the fall of 2017, and Speaker Spotlight's been around for 23 years, since 1995. So there's a big difference there. But the Spotlight Agency, where Speaker Spotlight is, we book speakers for keynotes, hosting, moderating for audiences in 35 different countries around the world. So we've been around a long time. Mm-hmm. The Spotlight Agency is celebrities for spokesperson roles and media campaigns, literary, TV, film. It's really a different type of business. We've been doing that work for many years, but we've taken it out of Speaker Spotlight and created this new business. So it is a little bit more image-based,
right?
Whereas Speaker Spotlight's more content, more topic-based.
Right, okay. So why the focus on image-based for Spotlight Agency? Just because these guys are celebrities, or?
Yeah, they are high profile.
Okay.
And the sales cycle is a little bit different. When we book a keynote, we send out a video of a keynote 5 to 7 minutes long. The meeting planner needs to see the keynote. They need to understand the topics. It's a shorter sales cycle, really. With the Spotlight Agency, it's more in-depth. You can't really understand what the talent can do for a whole campaign. It really takes a discussion. So you can see who the talent is. You can see some of the work we've done with them, but you really need to talk to the salespeople to understand the full campaign potential.
Got it. All right, Farah, last question. Where can people find out more about Speaker Spotlight and the Spotlight Agency?
Well, the best way to see it is to see our websites at speakers.ca and thespotlightagency.com.
Fantastic, Farah. Listen, this has been terrific. I know you're extremely busy. Really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Everybody check out those websites. Thank you for listening and have a great week.
Thank you for listening to the Stand Out Now podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes and rate and review it as well. You can find out more about our program at thestandoutnowpodcast.com. Thanks again and enjoy your week.